for a very interesting and thorough analysis of the play, which stimulated a lot of talk, a lot of comments. And now it's Hazem.
Lobna, in her beautifully elaborate presentation, has just spoken about the character in her play called Hazem, who cannot make up his mind about anything at all. And I think I would have to honor this tradition in my presentation, and sort of instead, I will not offer any conclusive argument in my presentation myself. The reason why I'm doing this is not because of my natural intellectual laziness, but because what I'm talking about today, the topic I'm trying to deal with today, is very much tied to an ongoing reality, the reality that we are now living. On my way here, as you probably, many of you have experienced today, on my way here, the traffic was terrible because of the strike by the workers of the Egyptian subway. So 2 years, almost 2 years after the Egyptian revolution, we are still suffering from a problem in terms of social justice and the plights of the working class. So this is a very interesting way to foreground the presentation I'm trying to talk about today. As you can see from the title of my presentation, and as you might guess from its title, my talk is about power and its asymmetries, in as much as this power defines the historically fixed liaison between the state and its cultural producers. I think this is a relevant topic to bring up in a symposium that has revolution in its title. For good or worse, one of the things that revolution has brought about is the division of artists and culture producers into those who were complicit or are complicit with the regime or the ancien regime or the foregone regime, and those who are revolutionary. I think that was a useful dichotomy at one point, but in the grand scheme of things, it may not be useful. I think what we need to do is to consider the case of artists who fall very tantalizingly somewhere in between. Those who are able to sort of articulate messages and discourses that are so much tantalizingly ambivalent in a way that could be understood by different sections of the audience. Theater is an exemplary way of studying this, because theater is by nature a heteroglossic art in which there are lots of voices and lots of people and personalities and subjectivities involved. So my case today is about one case like this, an artist and a work of art that can be described as producing a discourse that serves the interest of the Mubarak regime, but at the same time, it may be understood as revolutionary, radical work, depending on which side on the fence you would like to come down on. So this brings us again to the issue of the doubly contradictory position of the theater and culture producer. And here I'm quoting American theater theorist David Savran, who actually works very extensively applying the work of French theorist Pierre Bourdieu to the case of American theater. I quote, "Because of its marginal position, both economically and culturally, theater is a privileged portion of what Pierre Bourdieu designates as a literary and artistic field. As he explains, this field is contained within a larger field of economic and political power, while, at the same time, possessing a relative autonomy with respect to it. It is this relative autonomy, and I stress, it is this relative autonomy that gives the literary and artistic field, and theater in particular, both its high level of symbolic forms of capital and its low level of economic capital. In other words, despite its artistic cachet, it occupies a dominated position with respect to the field of economic and political power as a whole. And the individual culture producer or theater artist, insofar as he or she is part of the bourgeoisie, represents a dominated faction of the dominant class. The culture producer is thus placed in an irreducibly contradictory position. On the one hand, he or she is licensed to challenge hegemonic values insofar as it is a particularly effective way of accruing culture capital. On the other hand, the more effective his or her challenge, the less economic capital he or she is likely to amass. I mean, it's not for nothing that the testimony by Lenin and Rumley that Lobna has just quoted is called The Art of Cunning. It's a very interesting title. I enjoyed translating this testimony myself because Lenin, and I think that's a good way of following up on the work of Lenin and Rumley, is an exemplary artist of someone who tried to negotiate various types of censorship. Not necessarily state censorship, but also what he often spoke about, societal censorship. So it's always been, for him, theater is a very dangerous art because it always involves an element of cunning, trying to bring across a certain way of thinking or a message without necessarily incurring the wrath of different audience constituencies who might be dangerous to the work of art. Now let's apply what Savran says a bit to the three traditional types of theater in Egypt. I mean, most of us here might be familiar with this, but this is for the benefit for our international audiences. Traditionally, theater in Egypt is divided into state theater, which traditionally has always been of a literary quality, has a top-down approach, and commercial theater, or sometimes called private theater, which is usually profit-based, often accused of being cheap slapstick comedy without any social message. And then sometime in the late 80s and the early 90s, we had what we call free or independent theater movement. And when SIFT, the Cairo International Festival of Experimental Theater, was cancelled in 1990 because of the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, the artists were able to, these independent artists who are not affiliated with either the state theater or not part of the private theater proper, were able to organize their first festival. And the kind of movement they produced usually consisted of performance-based rejection of the text model, so you don't have really a literary model. I mean, you do have a literary model, but there was also an attempt to come up with a model of theater that is non-literary, depending very much on the power of performance and the theater. And at this point, now that I speak, this type of theater might be flourishing or might be in decline, again, depending on how you would like to see it. And my presentation today is about one of the leading figures of this movement. His name is Khalid Galal, I'm sure. He was born in 1967, and in 1997 he became the youngest, and this is an interesting thing about the state of independent theater movement, because the case in point, because Khalid became a case in point when he in 1997 became the artistic director of the state-run Shabah theater. And this launched his fast-paced journey up on the official ladder. He became part of the state machinery. So we had a movement that tried to sort of, come up with a model independent of the state culture machinery, but we had some of its successful artists joining the state machinery themselves. Whether you would like to think of this as a success in which the culture machinery of the state is being experiencing some kind of youthful regeneration, or you'd like to think of this corruption, is again depending on which side of the fence you'd like to come down on. Yet, apart from the varying success of a handful of the members, or the typical relative stability of small number of independent troops with foreign funding savvy directors, such as the Warja, for example, by Hassan Greti, or the Temple by Ahmed al-Attar, or whoever, the uneven career of the movement itself continued to pose vexing questions about the inevitability of contagion through either sponsorship or censorship, or ever more often as a mixture of both. Now Khalid, as I said, Khalid Galal continued his success as part of the state machinery, and this is his picture in the 2008 Cairo International Festival of Experimental Theater, receiving the Best Director Award for Qahwa Sada, the performance I'm going to talk about. 2 years later, he received Jaizat al-Tafawuq, the State Excellence Award, and this was again another recognition of his excellence and his artistic distinction, but also indicated him as an icon of younger elements joining the state machinery and sort of serving as confirming the message of youthful regeneration within the state machinery, of which Farouk Hosni, the Minister of Culture, whom you see here, has always been an exponent. Now we get to the Qahwa Sada. How many of us here did watch the play or see it online? Oh dear. So I cannot pontificate about the play if I forget anything about it. Okay. Consisting of a series of comic-related sketches on the widely felt gap between the abject present and an idealized version of the national past. This 2008 Egyptian play, Qahwa Sada, and I'll explain the title in a minute, originally evolved as a graduation project collaboratively created by a class on improvisational acting within the state's Creativity Center under its founding director, Khalid Galal. Now, despite this potentially nondescript origin, the play soon emerged as the culture event of the day. The play soon emerged as the culture event of the day. Many people actually reported watching the play once and twice or 3 times or 4 times, and it was seen as everybody who would love to see it. In a way, it was a mixed blessing. At a certain point, it was very difficult getting into the theater or securing a seat. To the point that one theater critic and a theater scholar, Amal from Ain Shams University, wrote a very interesting article saying, because the front seats are always reserved, the common herd have to wait. If you have seen Qahwa Sada, then you must be elite. Now, in a way, that was a terrible indicator of a play that attempted to sort of create a kind of a popular theater, but eventually became the culture event of the day in which all celebrities started flocking to watch the play. And the seats were reserved for the people who sort of, coveted. Here's a picture of Khalid Galal with Fatih Sroor, and with Adil Iman giving his stamp of approval to the play itself. Now, even more, this was presented within the State Creativity Center. And look at this, at the title here. Okay, I'll translate. So the Minister of Culture of Libya, this play was sent abroad to many Arab countries. So here is one of the interesting news about the play. The Minister of Culture of Libya called Farouk Hosni and said, Egypt is in our heart, and Qahwa Sada shows the environment or the ambience of freedom that President Mubarak has allowed. Yeah. And then there's another title that celebrates Qahwa Sada as causing a real coup d'etat, not evil in theater. And who goes to see the play? Suzanne Mubarak, the wife of the president, Ahmed Nazif, the prime minister, 13 ministers all went to the play and they loved it. Okay, you're laughing, which is good. So by now, I think I've given you an idea of the play as a play that's really part of the establishment complicitly. This is only one way of seeing the play. Let's look at what Nihat Sareha, our prominent theater critic, says in her review of the play. Not review of the play. This is her first article in Ahram Weekly right after the success of Evolution. Let's look at what she has to say about the play in retrospect. The First Lady heard about it and came to see it at the invitation of Minister of Culture Farouk Hosni. Along with her came a big horde of ministers, public figures, and Arab diplomats and their wives. And the lady was amused. Was even heard laughing loudly at many points. But the lady missed the whole point of the show. In my review of it, entitled The Sprightly Elegy, I wrote, the show turns its satirical gaze homeward, taking up some of the most salient problems that face Egyptian society today and farcically exaggerating them. The religious hypocrisy of the new class of upstart businessmen and the dangerous coalition of money and religion, the rising cost of marriage, which forces young people into long, secret, fruitless liaison, or condemns them to lifelong celibacy and sexual frustration, the chronic shortage of bread, the deterioration of the educational system, the worsening economic crisis, which has made it impossible for most people to find a home of their own, seek medical help, or even bury their dead, has driven some parents to sell their daughters under the guise of the marriage, and has caused waves of illegal immigration across the Mediterranean, often ending in disaster. By the end of the show, I concluded, the world portrayed on stage, though extremely farcical, seems a veritable wasteland. You can't say that the regime was not warned. So, which of the two conflicting characterizations are we to accept as more true to its message? Okay. As I hope to suggest here, both. Let me try to explain. I think one more good way of beginning is this picture. This is a picture that dates, that comes from 5th of March, 2003. And this was before the Anglo-American invasion of Kuwait. Suddenly, the NDP, the ruling party, decided to organize a demonstration protesting the invasion of Iraq. So here we have the state organizing a demonstration, acting like real radical revolutionaries, and organizing a demonstration and inviting all celebrities and people to come and join in this grand rally. I mean, this rally is by now forgotten, but I think it's very interesting to bring up today, because it's an interesting example of how the state can sometimes use the power of performance to sell itself as being revolutionary. Now, this cannot be separated from the two figures that we have here, Hazem M and Gamal Mubarak. Gamal Mubarak was sold on us at that time as Egypt's future. You want future regeneration? Here we have a young man. So, forget Iraq. The key to the Middle East is change in Cairo. This was a way of sort of allowing some kind of the guise of the youth regeneration to the regime, giving it a new lease on life. Hazem M is equally interesting. By that time in 2003, his film orbit was started to have a very interesting theme in which an old patriarch is being badly sort of, treated by younger generation trying to take his place. But he eventually somehow emerges unscathed and sort of achieves some kind of self-fulfillment by the end. This is a picture from Yacobian building in which he plays Zeki, I can't remember. He plays, the patriarch, who actually is feeling very much alienated by his surroundings in Cairo. That's changing. He calls it that this Cairo is becoming so much full of travesties. It's no longer the Cairo that he knew, the European type of Cairo. By the end of the film, he actually marries a young woman, not even half his age, but probably 40 years. He's 40 years her senior. And then we have an interesting way of looking at youth regeneration. It's okay to have youth, but we have to sort of mix, be part, marry, sort of the older generation. Now this sort of nostalgia to the old, this sort of stress on the old, the past, Egypt's glorious past, is something that the play does beautifully. It's a play that Qahwa said that does beautifully in terms of nostalgia. What happens in the play, the opening scene is very interesting, because the action begins when slowly and solemnly, and against the evocative, mournful music, the actors takes turns in advancing downstage to pay their last respects to a group of deceased dear ones. As befitting situation, the actors are all dressed in black. The man in elegant black suit, often complemented with a black eyeglass that would acquire various meanings of performance, while the ladies are dressed in black mourning dresses that would later double as sweaty ones. And they walk towards the downstage area, each is closely holding a certain item, which we get to see when they tearfully place it on the grave. As the items begin to fill the space before the audience's eyes, it becomes apparent that they are all relics of a dying or a dead golden era of Egyptian culture. An old wooden radio reminiscent of the first half 20th century, a gramophone, a traditional Egyptian earthenware water jug, as well as, most importantly, black and white portraits of the icons of those now distant idyllic times. Writers and thinkers and artists complete with some of the era's best painting as well, as portraits of the most definitive films of Egyptian cinema. Now, you'd expect this to be pivotal to this nostalgia and yearning for the past. There will be a sense of a rejection of the present, and the present at the time, in 2008, was very much defined by, can I have 5 more minutes? Just 1 minute. Yeah, just 1 minute. So I need to play something in. Okay, I'll try to cut this presentation a bit short, and then, of course, I'll be happy to listen to your question. But one interesting scene that I would like to play with you, and I have it in video that I would like, is the pivotal scene in which we have the, because we're speaking about Jabal Mubarak in this talk, lots of these people who came, lots of officials who came, would come and laugh at the scene of businessmen, most of them actually businessmen turned politicians, sort of praying and making their own supplications to God. So it was a kind of, so the play includes actually ridicule of neoliberal capitalism. I'd like to play you part of the scene, and then I will comment on, and then I will conclude. Okay? Would that be okay? Represents a kind of, as Professor Saleh has said, a kind of moral hypocrisy in which the rich are sort of, that's a legitimate argument. To me, hypocrisy is not the right word. To me, they seem very sincere, quite sincere. In fact, the comedy arises from the fact that they are too sincere to the point of being blind to the kind of disparity between the reality and what they are saying. So I'm not sure hypocrisy is the right word here. And this is how a scene like this could draw laughter from Suzanne Mubarak and co. Because the scene is very kind of benign, unharmful type of criticism of the neoliberal elite. Not as being necessarily corrupt, but as being remote from reality. They are sort of away from reality. And the answer to this could be simple as that. The answer to this could be simple as that. Is that what we end up having, a way of addressing this issue is not to say social justice, but a kind of a compassionate conservatism. These people, all what they need to do is probably sort of, have some kind of give more charity and be more aware of their own reality. So, this is only part of what I'm trying to do, in this presentation is show that certain scenes, certain aspects of the performance allow themselves to be understood differently by different sections of the audience. So a play like this could achieve success among different types audiences, because these different sections would project on them the kind of message they would like to have. Thank you.